We've talked about leadership. Leadership is a choice. You get up one morning and you say, you know what? I am going to do this. And if people realize that they can trust you, they will support you. But if people realize that you're going to do just like he mentioned, they will not support you. The question is very straightforward. Are you suggesting to us that if, knowing exactly what is happening right now in Cameroon, you've studied in Africa, you've studied all of Africa, you know exactly the situation in Cameroon, this is how I can go about it, to stand up and be the top 10% of the people who usually will lead and will follow, and I will make a difference in Cameroon.
No, for those that know me, you know that I am a plain-spoken person, and I wouldn't participate or contribute to rumors. If I have something to say, I will say it the way I see it. I will say it out of conviction. I would say it with a determination to make it happen. And so this, going back to my first response, this is not about me as a person. It's about our country. It's about 18 million people who have a lot to offer, a contribution to make to the global village of the world. It's about some of the challenges we face and how to fix them. And even more importantly, it's about some of the opportunities that we have ahead of us that we still could miss if we made the wrong choices. This is much larger than any one individual for me, whether it's the incumbent or whether it's aspiring or past. This is big. It's about our country. That continent doesn't need another failed state. Our country has gone through some rough spots, but we've got tremendous potential. And that, for me, is where the emphasis ought to be. What can we do for our 18 million compatriots? And how can we move our country forward? And how can we find leadership that can lift our country? Because it's not just a question of having a transition. It's important to have a transition that is meaningful, that can have people, Cameroonians say, 2, 3, 4, 5 years after the transition, it was worth the effort and it was worth the investment, because we can look back and see what positive impact that has meant for our country. I know that George Foreman used to have a commercial, is it on Midas? He says, I've had it, I won't take it anymore. When it gets to that point, I will be very straightforward, and even if I'm soft-spoken, I'll be very straightforward about it.
There is a culture that has become acceptable to many of us. If I could name a few: selfishness, corruption, extortion, and many other things, which the list will be so long if I want to finish. Those of us who are out of our dear fatherland are expected to be ambassadors of Cameroon. Unfortunately, most of us are actually a disgrace to our fatherland. How can we, considering all these vices, team up together? If you realize, you will see that there are a lot of differences in culture. There are some people with clear heads that can think rightly. There are some who the wrong things are those that are acceptable to them. How can we actually come together to move as one? Because if we can actually talk here, but how can we team up with these differences, with tribalism, with nepotism, with favoritism, corruption, and all those things? How can we come up as one to move forward and make the changes that we all deserve and want?
I see it as a collective effort. And we would need to rid ourselves of some of the things that we criticize our own leaders for. And that's why I really put a lot of stock in these opportunities for dialogue. Because one of the things that is lacking in our body politic back home is that our leaders don't talk. They don't discuss their differences. You know, they don't try to iron out their differences by sitting around a table. And that's really hurting us. And I'm so delighted that within the diaspora, we're beginning to get into that habit of dialogue, like the one we're having here today. And because by having these dialogues, it makes it easier for us to now tell them, to nurture them, to sit around the table and talk, because it's so enriching. So I really commend you for your recommendation, and I think each and every one of us should take that to heart. If we have to be true ambassadors of Cameroon in our own way, in our own communities, or in what we do in our own academic institutions, we have to lead by example. And we have to be the first to shy away, to shun some of the ills that plague our society and for which we criticize our current leadership.
I'm assuming that you've emerged as a leader in the Cameroonian community in diaspora. And so for this reason, there's a very serious debate, or something serious happened, I think 2 weeks ago, concerning the Human Rights Declaration, African Human Rights Declaration, with the Southern Cameroons movement. What is your position when it comes to the SCNC? Do you think it is something that needs to be addressed by the government in Cameroon? Or do you think that's a question that needs to be swept under the carpet? I think to many Anglophone Cameroonians, they want to hear something from their leaders, not just the government. So what would be your position on that? Thank you.
My position with regards to the NCNC, whether I believe that that's an issue that needs to be tackled or an issue that should be swept under the carpet. And in phrasing the question, I think you also said you want to know what my position will be. I don't want to wait for the future. I can tell you what my position is, because I've said it before. I have said it in Cameroon numerous times. I've said it publicly at press conferences in Cameroon. The Anglophone issue in Cameroon is an issue that needs to be dealt with. It's an issue that has been exacerbated. It has been exacerbated by the absence of dialogue. And it's not just in Cameroon alone. A number of African countries have failed because simple grievances, straightforward grievances that have been raised by citizens, have been swept under the rug for a long time. In Nigeria, when Ken Saro-Wiwa, do you guys remember Ken Saro-Wiwa, human rights activist? All he did was he wrote a petition, pen and paper. The military hanged him. And see how much Nigeria has paid in the Niger Delta by the loss of blood, the shedding of blood and treasure in the Niger Delta. They could have taken Ken Saro-Wiwa's petition and discussed it and debated it and found a solution. The Niger Delta would not have been what it is today, and Nigeria would not have paid the price that it's paid. There are grievances that need to be addressed, and I believe they can be addressed. And I've said so. They should be addressed. So what came out of Banjul, one didn't even have to go to Banjul to say that those issues should be tackled. That's what politics is all about. It's about listening to each other and dealing with their issues to make sure that we can all identify with a nation state. Because we all come from different backgrounds and different experiences and different cultures. And in some cultures, traditional chiefs are more important than in other cultures. In some cultures, women have a more prominent role than in other cultures. But once we have agreed that we want to form an entity, a nation state, we have to find ways to accommodate each other's grievances. That's what it means to govern. And so for me, it's not something that I wait for the future. It's something that I think should be dealt with, and it's something that I am convinced can be dealt with. It takes political will, and I think that's the weak link in that whole equation.